Before we start, I really kind of want to lay the groundwork because this is incredibly striking to me. So 75% of people over the age of 20 are either overweight or obese. And when we break it down and come down, we're looking at 20% of 5 to 20-year-olds, which is incredibly scary and remarkable. And actually 10% of 2 to 5-year-olds right now are having weight issues. I mean, so we're seeing this amazing kind of trickle-down effect, which is really influencing our entire population. And so we really need to address this in a meaningful way. In my own practice, I seldom see patients who are actually doing weight loss for the first time. Typically, it's the second, the third, the fourth. I mean, so obviously what that says to me is that we're not fixing this fundamentally, otherwise there wouldn't be a second or a third or fourth time. And I seldom see people who would actually say, you know what, I'm my ideal weight, this is where I'd like to be. Most people would actually like to lose some weight, and so I think that that's an important fact too. So the bottom line message here is that you actually can get to your ideal weight and maintain it. But in order to do that, you're going to really have to get into the science and get into the facts, and you're going to have to know what you need to do. And this is the most important thing that I think everybody needs to take away from tonight, is that this is not really about weight loss. I want you to really begin to see your weight as a symptom of underlying biochemistry and what's going on inside. Because as most of you in the room tonight, what I'm really passionate about is long-term health and wellness, and the exact same principles that I'm going to talk about tonight are really going to be the keys to your long-term health and wellness. And so you can have it all, and that's really what I want to help you both learn and accomplish. So what do we do about where we are? Well, you know, what we know is obviously based on trouble as a nation. If we continue down this road, we have to do something different. We really need to fundamentally change the way that we're fueling our body. We need to be thinking about food as fuel. We need to stop dieting and really use food as fuel to make our body go. We need to begin to see being overweight as a symptom of underlying issues that actually need to be addressed. And I'm always telling people, it's a little bit like the gauge light in your car comes on, right? And what does that tell you? It tells you that there's underlying issues in that engine. It's time to open the hood, look inside, and see what's happening. But when we look at weight as the final issue that we're trying to accomplish as opposed to a symptom, what we end up doing is band-aiding that symptom and not really looking deep and getting to the underlying cause. So we really want to talk about these underlying causes tonight. The only way that you will ever achieve long-term weight maintenance, you'll get to your ideal weight and you'll keep that for a long period of time, is if you fundamentally feel different in your body. And this is really the only way, what I'm going to talk about tonight, that you're going to feel different in your body. When I say feel different, I mean in terms of your energy, your brain function, your sleep, your hormones, everything basically gets fixed when you're doing this fundamentally correctly. So I want to make some comments too, because we're in February. January is weight loss month, and I mean, don't we all see the ads, and we see all the people that are offering you the solutions to weight loss in January. My trainer is here, Holden, but you know, you go ahead and we see you're going to lose all your weight by exercising, or you're going to do one of these programs, Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or whatever, and everything is a solution to weight issues. But what I really want to do tonight is get fundamentally back into the science of weight loss, because unless you're there, you're not going to be long-term successful. And unfortunately, most of the programs that are out there are not based in science, or they're based in old science, so things that we believed were true for a long period of time that we've now proven are not true. And so you have to actually stay in the current science to be successful. So you want to listen to somebody who actually knows that science and has done this successfully, both personally and, in my opinion, with other individuals. And you want to get the updated information. So, you know, one of the other principles tonight is all of this this belief that losing weight is less calories and more exercise. It does not work. It will never get you there. This calories in, calories out thing that we've been following for decades, it doesn't work. And so let's get rid of that and actually move into the new science so that people can be successful. So what are the keys to weight loss success? Well, there isn't a one-size-fits-all. So there's a lot of good books and pieces of information out there. And just because there's not a one-size-fits-all doesn't mean you can't be successful, because there is a one-size-fits-you. And I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of part of this roadmap of how you can actually tailor this to fit you. But there's not one thing that every person can do to be long-term successful. But the questions that you should really ask if you're even pursuing any sort of a weight loss program is, number one, will I lose weight on it, and can I maintain it? Because nothing's more frustrating than somebody losing weight and then gaining it all back again. It's demoralizing, it's frustrating, and it really lessens your desire to go back in and try to focus on any sort of weight loss again. Can you stop dieting about this? I need to eat less calories and exercise more. And it always amazes me, because even when I lay this out for people, we're so trained to think about calories that a lot of times, even after educating people, their question will be, well, how many calories should I eat? And we're not going to even talk about calories tonight, because again, calories in, calories out doesn't work. And if you're counting calories to be successful with your weight loss program, you're not going to be successful. You will not lose weight through exercise alone. And yet exercise is absolutely critical for the whole weight loss picture. So I want to talk about that and have you understand how you put the exercise piece in place to actually be long-term successful. What we know is that your body has built-in mechanisms. So if you're eating less and exercising more, it's, your body's going to stop you from the goal or the possibility of really actually losing any weight and maintaining it. So let's get the facts and actually be successful in the process. So what I want to talk tonight, because again, we can do all these fancy things, but I always find that when you get back to basics and you're looking at the basic biochemistry of the body, how it works, how it's worked for millions of years, how it will work for millions of years in the future, you always, always win. And what I want you and every person that tries to lose weight, maintain ideal weight, and be healthy to accomplish is actually winning. So we're going to talk about food, supplements, hormones, sleep, stress balance, exercise, and just briefly touch on other factors. So basic program that exists out there, whether it be fasting, juice cleanses, vegan eating, paleo, Whole30, ideal protein, South Beach, Atkins, really at the heart of all these things is actually caloric restriction. And there's some pieces that have some science that we're going to blend in tonight, but we really, these things are focused on lower calories, and that's really not where we want to go. And I always tell people there's so many different diets out there that if somebody is really trying to lose weight, and they're trying to research what they should do, you should be confused, because there's so much information out there that it's actually incredibly confusing to try to figure out, how do I accomplish this goal? So follow nature and the biochemistry. Again, you will always win if you do this. So kind of getting into what we really want to talk about tonight, what I really want to present, because that's how our body was designed. And whether or not you want to call it feast and famine, whether or not you want to call it seasonal eating, so kind of winter, summer eating, it's all revolving around the same basic biochemistry that's been programmed into our body for millions of years. We were designed through nature to survive both in abundance and scarcity. And we don't really utilize those scientific principles in our body to our full capability, and as a result, our weight is not ideally where it should be. So our body is programmed with the ability to burn both fat as well as sugar. And nature is very kind to us in some ways and not so kind to us in others. We have a lot of ability when we are 0 to 40 to make a lot of mistakes, and our body will actually overcome those things and correct those things and work with us. But what I find after 40, we hear people say, well, I'm just old, or I'm, the years are catching up with me, or all these different things. And the reality is, when you are 40 plus, the fueling, the health pieces that you need to do in your body need to be tighter and more on target. Otherwise, you get degeneration of your body. And basically, what's happening is that nature has designed us to be reproductive. And so it supports us in the process of being healthy and well through the reproductive years. That once we are no longer reproductive, so 40 plus, it sees us as expendable. And so what I want to teach you tonight too is how do you actually reaccomplish your body and nature not seeing you as expendable after 40, so that you can be both healthy and your ideal weight. So feasting is during summer. And so what we know about summer is there is an abundance of calories. You're going to have abundance of fruits and vegetables and grains and meats. Our body is designed to burn sugar during those periods of time, and if we have excess sugar, food, fuel, we actually store that as fat, right? Because create a surplus and a source of fuel, so that when we hit the winter months and we are in famine, we have the ability to actually tap into those fuel sources. And indeed, we're designed to burn fat during the winter or famine months, not only our own body fat, but actually fat in our diet. So, what is that we do an incredibly good job of being in feast, right? With our current food supply, we constantly have availability of fruits and vegetables and grains and rice. I mean, you can get basically any fruit you want at Central Market any day of any month of any year, because we have these things constantly available to us. So what's happened is that we ended up being constantly in feast or summer, and we've lost our ability or our flexibility or our pliability to actually shift into this fat burning that's supposed to happen during famine and winter months. And as a result of it, our entire biochemistry is off. So we never get to famine. And basically this is a result of the modern food supply and the constant availability of all these different foods. So what we're trying to accomplish is this metabolic flexibility that we originally had. We're programmed this way. It is part of our nature. It is part of our biochemistry. It is the way that we're supposed to be fueling. And when we get stuck in this feasting carbohydrate mode without the famine and winter fuel burning mode, we lose this flexibility or this pliability that exists inside of us. And it's kind of this concept that we see with everything: you either use it or lose it. And so what I want to teach you tonight is how to get that pliability and that flexibility back. It's a natural part of how we're designed and put together, and we can get it back again, fortunately, but we actually have to create an environment where our body can do that. And indeed, again, the thing that's exciting about this is that this is really the key to long-term health too. So it's not just about losing weight, it's actually giving your body what it needs. So, why would you care about this? Well, this is the cause of fat, flabby, and 40. And I mean, we all see these changes that are happening in our body as we age, and it's not just inevitable, it's a result of misfueling our body. So eating without feast and famine destroys our mitochondria. And I want to talk a little bit about mitochondria, because at the heart of this program is something called mitochondrial rejuvenation or regeneration. I want to talk about what these mitochondria are, why they're important, and why you should specifically care about them. But essentially, mitochondria are these energy production factories in our body. If we boiled it all down, what we are in the end is just kind of a mass of these doing a couple of things. They're controlling all the energy production in our body. So when we feel old and tired as we get old, it's because our mitochondria have lost the ability to generate energy. They control our metabolism. So if we don't have healthy mitochondria, we are destined to have slow metabolism and actually to gain weight. They supply the energy to basically run every single organ system in our body. So as we start thinking about Alzheimer's disease and heart disease and kidney disease and all these things that happen as a result of aging, we need to be thinking about how healthy are my mitochondria and what do I actually need to do to regenerate these mitochondria. And again, they are critically linked to this feasting and fasting process. So every time you think about mitochondria, think about energy. When you have healthy mitochondria, you're going to have health. When you have unhealthy mitochondria, which are being fueled solely off of summer carbohydrate fueling without this shifting back and forth, you're going to have disease. And one of the principles of this is that, interestingly, when your mitochondria are running off of sugar or carbohydrates, it's actually what we call a dirty fuel. So you're making 30% more free radicals, and most of us have heard about free radicals, but these are things that actually degenerate your health. Conversely, when your mitochondria are actually fueling off of fat, they're running off of clean fuel, meaning that there's less free radical production and there's actually a tremendous more amount of efficiency. It's kind of like running off of 100 octane versus 50 octane. So we get better energy production with less cost and less free radical exhaust when we're actually fueling off of fat as opposed to sugar or carbohydrates. So, I always think of the body, what is the importance in the body? And this really struck me because what we know is that if all of your mitochondria went down, you would live for about 15 seconds. That's how critical they are for health. Without air, you would make it for 5 minutes. So that's a pretty important thing to run our body off of. Without water, you can make it for a few days. Without food, you can make it for several months. So again, always thinking about the hierarchies, biochemistry, the order of importance in our body and what's fundamental. The most important thing is actually healthy mitochondrial function. When they are inefficient, when they are running off of dirty fuel, you experience fatigue, brain fog, inflammation, all these different signs of aging. And literally, again, every single degenerative disease that exists has some basis in mitochondrial dysfunction. So what happens when your mitochondria are burning fat versus carbohydrate? And this is this concept of ketosis, and many of us have heard about ketosis. Many of us are confused about ketosis. Many of us are concerned about ketosis. Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? And so I just want to lay some basic facts down. What is ketosis? What does it mean? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? So ketosis is essentially the state where your body is burning fat instead of sugar or carbohydrates. And this is a little link. I hope you all will take a picture of this and actually go to this little website. This is one of Holden's videos. And it's important because it shows you very specifically what your body does when it's burning different types of fuels. And it's a great little video because it really lays down why it's better to be burning fat as opposed to any other fuel source. But when you're in ketosis as opposed to sugar or glycogen, you are fundamentally changing the way that your body uses energy, which is an incredibly positive thing. But this is the key. We're not meant to stay in ketosis either. We're meant to feast and famine. We're meant to actually alternate between these fuel sources. And indeed, if people go into ketosis and they stay chronically in ketosis or fat burning, you're going to actually get muscle loss. You're going to get not an improvement in all of the diseases of aging. And interestingly, it's the shift between the fat burning and ketosis back into the feasting and the carbohydrate burning that actually creates the regeneration of the mitochondria. So just like balance and everything in nature, you've got to go back and forth. So we'll talk a little bit about how there's a lot of different ways to do that. but that back and forth process is critically important for weight maintenance, mitochondrial regeneration, and health. Oh, by the way, too, if you talk to your doctor and he says, no, you shouldn't be in ketosis, that's an unhealthy state. Many times people confuse ketosis with ketoacidosis, which is actually an unhealthy, dangerous medical state. And those words are so similar that it becomes confusing for people. But ketoacidosis and ketosis, the only thing that they have in common is some similarity in their name. Okay, so they're totally different states. So when is the first time that most people heard about ketosis? It was with Atkins, right? And so Atkins was all about weight loss, but unfortunately there wasn't necessarily this component of health gain that actually happened with Atkins. So we're not talking about Atkins tonight. We're talking about cyclical feast and famine eating. We're talking about winter and summer programming. We're talking about mitochondrial regeneration and how to actually improve your health. So cyclical ketosis, coming in and out of feast and famine, is a highly healthy state where you're burning fats. You must always follow it by this high carbohydrate intake phase where you're actually feasting. It's incredibly successful for long-term weight maintenance. And beyond that, again, we want to regenerate our mitochondria and actually accomplish health. So seasonal eating, the ability to burn sugar and fat, you know, and some of the people here, I mean, everybody's kind of heard about paleo now, but I think the thing that's interesting is the foods that we were probably genetically designed to eat for millions of years, right? The concept is we eliminate all foods that are new to humanity. But what paleo still doesn't do either is it doesn't take us in and out of feast and famine. We can actually be paleo and we can constantly be in feast, right? Because we can have the abundance of all these high carb vegetables, sweet potatoes, these foods that we're going to have to take out to actually be in that famine stage. So I actually think of feast and famine eating as like, you know, let's dub it real paleo. Because if you actually lived 1,000,000 years ago, you would be doing paleo, but you would also be doing it in a feast and famine mechanism. So how do you actually get here? How do you actually do this practically? And there's slow on-ramps and there's fast on-ramps to actually this ketotic state. But basically, when you're in ketosis, when you are basically do is limit the amount of carbohydrate that you're going to take in. And this is where there isn't a one-size-fits-all, because different people's bodies will require different reductions in their carbohydrate intake to actually get there. So this is where you have to work with your body, experiment. The good news is that there's actually devices, and we have one of these in our practice now, that can actually measure the ketotic state. So when you're burning fat, you're making certain byproducts of fat burning, and we have a little device that you can blow into. It's called Ketonics. It'll be in one of these different slides where you can actually measure one of these ketones that you're burning and figure this out for yourself. The more weight you lose, the easier it is to get into ketosis. The more you get to your ideal weight, and you're moving back and forth between these fuel sources, the easier it actually becomes to maintain that flexibility and pliability and actually get there. So the good news is that, you know, the use it or lose it. I mean, if you haven't gone to the gym for 6 years, the first time you go, it's pretty rough. The more you do it, the more your body actually develops the ability to use that muscle, work with that muscle, and the easier it gets over time. So when you're reducing your carbohydrates, and hold your question, we'll get back to this in just a second, and I want to answer everybody's questions at the end. You also have to be eating an appropriate amount of high quality protein. And this is kind of some interesting science too, because we're now learning about this pathway called the mTOR pathway. And not to get too technical here, but what the mTOR pathway is, it's a pathway that once again With balance, you don't want too much protein, because if you have too much protein, you'll stimulate excessive mTOR, and we now know that mTOR is basically associated again with things like cancer, overstimulation of tissues, so on and so forth. Conversely, you don't want to underconsume protein, because then you're actually burning your muscle as an energy source as opposed to burning fat. So there's a sweet spot of basically protein intake, and what we found it to be is basically a gram per kilogram of weight of protein each day. And what we do in my practice is we actually get a body composition, right? So we can figure out exactly how many kilograms of lean body mass you have, and then we're able to tell you exactly how many grams of protein and work with that in a really practical way so that you can get that protein need just right for yourself too. So then once you've established ketosis, by lowering your carbohydrate intake, you're eating an adequate amount of protein. Interestingly, the fat piece is not super important as long as you're eating healthy and quality fats. So avocados, olives, coconut oil, some of these natural oils that actually help to fuel your body and create energy. Then you're going to go ahead and go into feast. You're going to bring your carbohydrate intake back up again. It can sometimes be 100, 150 grams of carbohydrate. You can either do this with healthy carbs, so all of a sudden your sweet potatoes and corn and carrots and all these other things are coming back in again, or you can actually go out and have a piece of cheesecake or a birthday cake or whatever. So you can use the feasting portion seasonally based on birthdays or holidays or trips or travel or whatever, but you can actually work this feast and famine program in a way that you're actually coinciding with really kind of how you want to live and when you want to have fun with higher carbohydrate intake. And once again, the feasting phase is where the mitochondrial rejuvenation happens, so we don't want to stay in chronic ketosis. So don't you need to count calories, right? Ask no matter how many times I kind of am emphasizing calories don't count. So researchers have firmly debunked that all calories are the same. So what that means is if I eat a calorie of fat versus a calorie of protein versus a calorie of carbohydrate, those calories, that 1 calorie that I consume, does completely different things in my body. So it is not true that it's calories in, calories out, and all that matters are calories, and all calories are the same. The same calorie can have completely different metabolic effects in the body. And I had to laugh because one of the things that I read right into the new year is like, well, what alcohol should I drink if I want to lose weight? And the person that answered the question went right into, well, as long as they had the same number of calories, it doesn't matter. And that is not the truth. You cannot look at a calorie as a calorie. Different nutrients provoke incredibly different hormonal effects in the body, and we're going to talk about hormones in just a minute and why they're important for weight loss. And what you eat actually makes a huge difference. So again, if you eat the same number of calories of carbohydrate as you eat of fat or protein, how that influences your hormones, your hunger, your cravings, all these different things, it's going to be very different. So we really do need to care about what we call the macronutrients, or what kind of carbohydrate, fat, and protein combination we're putting together when we eat, because it has a big difference in terms of what happens in the body. So what are the benefits of being in ketosis? And I mean, I can tell you from my own personal experience and working with many, many patients, that when people are in ketosis, when I am in ketosis, I feel better. And I feel better because I'm running off of clean fuel. It's more efficient. There's less free radical production. And I basically have no hunger. My brain is turned on, and I am just in the zone in terms of how my brain is working. It's easy to lose weight. Basically, getting to your ideal weight basically becomes effortless. This is important in terms of how you lose weight. So sometimes people lose weight and it all comes from their lean body mass, which means their metabolism is slowed at the end of the program. And again, not to get too technical, but ketone bodies are very similar to what we call branch chain amino acids, which are the things that make up. So when you're in ketosis, you're actually in a state where you're sparing muscle. And so at the end of the program, you're going to be as metabolically active as you were prior to your weight loss program. There's a lot of science now on fat fueling and its benefits in terms of cancer prevention as well as disease prevention. And again, it increases longevity because every single degenerative disease has this basis in mitochondrial dysfunction. A little bit more on how to get there. So sometimes we use HCG in our practice, which has some hormonal benefits that are different than the on-ramp of just reducing your carbohydrate intake. So that can actually get you, you can cut your carbs. You can do it drastically, you can do it slowly. Each person will have a certain number of carbs that they can take in that will tip them in and out of ketosis. You should determine your own threshold for ketosis, and again, you're going to use this Ketonics device to do that. And then one of the things that's really new in that little video that I mentioned, that is Holden's video, you can also use what we call now exogenous ketones. Take these ketones that would naturally be made in your body, and you can actually drink them in a drink to kind of instantly put you into this ketosis state where your body is seeing these ketone bodies to burn. And the nice thing about that is that you're kind of instantly into this no hunger, no cravings, better brain function state. And so we've got some really kind of nice scientific adjuvants or toys that we can play with to actually get you into ketosis more easily. By the way, and Holden has that product, and it's a great product to, again, kind of transition into that state. So this is kind of an important slide. When I looked at the science on is breakfast the most important meal, people talk about the fact that if you eat breakfast, people who eat breakfast are closer to their ideal weight. Well, that might be true, but there's other biochemistry going on, because when people actually do this process of fasting, so they have this long period of time between dinner and breakfast, which is kind of considered this modified fast, where they delay breakfast and don't eat until they're hungry in the morning, which is sometimes 12 hours, 14 hours, and skip breakfast with their first meal being more like an early lunch. There's actually some important benefits here. And so the new science says that breakfast is not the most important meal. And indeed, this is where that whole concept of butter coffee has come in. And a lot of times I'll talk to my patients, you get up in the morning, if you love your cup of coffee, you take your cup of coffee, you put it into it fat, so your butter. You can use something called MCT oil, which is a modified fat that actually comes from coconut oil that once again kind of goes straight to that brain to turn that brain on. And then a lot of times I'll put, for instance, like a collagen powder into that. I'll blend it in my little bullet blender. I'll have that first thing in the morning, and literally I'm not hungry till 10 or 11 o'clock, and that's when I actually have my first meal of the day. So it's kind of this modified fasting state. Longer fasting is a whole other science, and you have to be careful with it. But I'll tell you, some of the patients in my practice that have done this, they have seen incredible reductions in, for instance, their hemoglobin A1C, so their average blood sugar levels. I mean, they're seeing some of these really profound beneficial effects in their chemistries that once again really are about longevity and disease prevention and well-being. So action items. I always kind of like, okay, so what did we just talk about? What do you need to do? So you need to figure out your protein needs, right? So we need to get a body composition. We need to figure out how many kilograms of lean body mass that we have, and then we need to go ahead and eat a gram of protein per that kilogram of lean body mass, and so that's all about getting a body composition. We need to limit our carbs, right? And that's going to be different for each person. You don't know how many carbs you're going to be able to eat or not eat to actually get into ketosis. So the way to do that scientifically is with this ketonics.co. Just so you know, we have these things available in our practice that we kind of rent for you. So as you're playing with this idea, you can actually figure out how many grams of carbs do I need to actually eat to get into ketosis. And the good news is that you don't have to worry about fat. You can eat an unlimited amount of healthy fat. One of my friends is here tonight who actually does these things called fat bombs, and she probably brought some with her tonight. But this whole concept of fat bombs is, you know, if you need a little bit more energy or fuel during the day, where you're going to go to is fat, and she makes these things out of avocado and chocolate, and so they can kind of boost your energy as well as be a treat for actual further energy production during the day. And just for fun, if you call the office and say Stinson's 2018, you will get a free body composition. So if you don't know where your lean body mass is to get your protein fueling, you can get that for free if you come into the office, and we're happy to do that for you. Okay, so I talked a little bit about how foods have different hormonal effects, right? And we do want to touch briefly on hormones, because when we talk about ketosis and feast and famine and all these other things, super important. But in addition, after 40, our hormones change, right? We are no longer reproductive. Nature becomes not so kind to us. And so we really have to address the post-40 hormones that are happening in men and women. And I think for women, it's even more prominent because we have kind of a different whole reproductive picture. I mean, men can reproduce later in life. Our reproductive years typically tend to be, early mid-40s, and then we have this huge shift in kind of what nature is doing inside of our bodies in terms of our hormones. So when we think about hormones, we're typically thinking about what? Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Yes, those are all important. But I also like to look at these other hormones of hunger and satiety and fat burning, so specifically insulin, leptin, and ghrelin. Insulin has to be low for your body to get into fat burning. Leptin is the hormone of satiety, so it makes us feel full and satiated and tells us not to eat. Ghrelin is the hormone of hunger, so when you have a lot of ghrelin around, you're ravenous and you want to eat. And the important concept here is that, again, when we're in feasting phase, when we're stuck there, when we've lost our biochemical flexibility, all these things get off. And suddenly there is no satiety, and there is uncontrolled hunger, and there's inability to actually burn body fat because the hormones of weight loss have shifted and have gotten out of balance. Conversely, when you're feast and famining, and they work just like they were originally designed to. So we talked about insulin, we've talked about ghrelin. Ghrelin is also an issue not only because it makes you hungry all the time, but it actually creates insulin resistance, and most of us have heard about insulin resistance now in terms of like diabetes and early diabetes. And when your ghrelin levels are off and imbalanced, you're going to be hungry. I mean, there's just no way around that. Being overweight also decreases leptin sensitivity. So again, if your leptin that says I'm full, I need to stop eating is off and it gets out of balance, once again, you're never going to experience satiation. And you're not going to overcome the biochemical imbalances of hormones. These things are so powerful, they're such important drivers in your body that unless those things are working on your behalf, you will not win the war in terms of having ideal weight. So now let's talk about some of the things that we kind of think about more commonly. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, again, all these things shift in both men and women in the post-40 body because now nature says we're no longer reproductive. Stress hormones, because we have a lot of stress in our world and what I call stress imbalance. We have oftentimes imbalances of stress hormones that create weight gain, hunger, and a lot of other disease processes. We've talked about ghrelin and leptin, and we can actually measure these things. And so these are things that I work with in my practice also because I want you to be hormonally balanced as well as feast and famining, because once again, when these things are in the zone and where they need to be, especially in the post-40 body, your body is sensing that you are not expendable, that you're in balance, that you're young, that you're healthy. And so these hormones become equally important in actually supporting health as well as long-term weight maintenance. Don't fool yourself. I mean, food is addictive. We know that, for instance, when you eat sugar, it lights up the same centers in your brain as cocaine. And so food is very powerful. We know that certain foods, sugar, corn syrup, MSG, and oils, they tend to light up these centers in the brain and create cravings and hunger and desire for that same food again. And so I always think about this addictive piece with food too, because if you eat a food palatable and delicious and satiating, and you feel less stressed, and you will feel that, the next time you feel stressed, guess what you want to do? You want to eat that food that made you feel better. And right there we have this food addiction piece going back and forth. And so, you know, it's interesting. I always think about, again, well, what would have happened, you know, a million years ago? Well, maybe we, you know, overconsumed a massive bush of, you know, blackberries, and, you know, we're in sugar overload and sugar toxicity. Well, you know, a month later, whatever, when all those berries were gone, no matter how hard it would be to come off that sugar high, you had to, because those berries are no longer available. So, you know, nature kind of took care of the process then. Now what do you do when you want more sugar? You go to the store, you go to 7-Eleven, you know, you go to your pantry. I mean, again, we can constantly feed these addictions if we're not really careful with them. And sometimes there's so much going on there that I actually talk about doing neurochemistry testing for people. Because remember, these things are neuro or brain active. So they're actually working on dopamine and serotonin. You know, dopamine's about drive, serotonin's about calm, epinephrine, norepinephrine are about energy. We're actually lighting up these centers in our brain with these foods. And if we really set up these patterns, sometimes we actually have to do that neurochemistry testing to see where the person is, to break those cycles and get them out of that. So we can actually give them something different than food that will light up that same center in their brain, but doesn't continue to promote that food addiction. Okay, action items. What do you need to do here? So you really need to know where your hormones are. You need to get your levels tested. You need to be scientific. Again, you can't just guess. Every single person is different. So things that we look at leptin, ghrelin, insulin, and hemoglobin A1C, which is your 3-month blood sugar average, progesterone, testosterone, reproductive hormones. We look at DHEA, which is about, again, your adrenal system and stress. Ashley is here tonight. I am a profound believer in hormone replacement therapy and the ability to actually get it just right for every single individual through compounding pharmacies. And we want to actually do that process, right? It shouldn't be the person's responsibility to get a hormone to fit their body. It should be the hormone's responsibility to give them exactly what they need. And that's what you actually achieve through compounding, in addition to this concept of what we call bioidentical hormones. So if I'm going to put a hormone back into your body, I want that hormone to be identical to what was there. That's the key that fits in the lock to actually create function. And again, all I'm trying to do with any program I do in my practice is reproduce nature. I can't do any better than nature. All I can do is understand it and actually reproduce it. We've talked about neurochemistry testing. Sometimes that's important. We talked about adrenal testing, so I can actually look at kind of an overall picture of your adrenals with your DHEA levels. I can do a 4-spot cortisol where I'm actually looking at these stress hormones, because sometimes these things are really flipped and imbalanced, creating sleep issues and immune issues and anxiety and so on and so forth. And we actually, again, if you call the office and say, since 2018, we've actually put together some bundles or packages of hormones that the lab has graciously offered to us, because we really want people to get this information and get it right. A quick note about, you know, a lot of times I get asked, well, will insurance cover my lab? And the answer is no. And the unfortunate thing is that most of us in this room have elected to have health insurance because insurance is some sort of a catastrophic illness that happens because we understand how expensive it is. But health insurance is really disease insurance. Okay, it really has nothing to do with health. It's what you're going to get and what you're going to do when you're in that disease state. And so the frustrating thing for me, as well as I'm sure many of you, is that in some senses when we look at, well, I spend this much on my health insurance, it kind of drives a natural tendency to believe, well, if it's not covered, it's not necessary or it's not important. And nothing could be further from the truth, because anything that you're going to get in my practice is likely going to be truly health insurance, but it all has to be paid out of pocket. And so I just encourage each of you too not to let health insurance drive your decisions in terms of your health, because if you do, you will stay in the disease world as opposed to moving over into the health world. So this is what I just talked about. One of the other options is these medical savings accounts. This is kind of what I've gone to, but basically you're putting money in that allows you to take that money out and spend it on, you know, supplements or bioidentical hormones or chiropractic or acupuncture or a lot of things that really, again, are not in the disease-based world, right, where your body doesn't work, therefore you get this prescription or this intervention, but move you back into the health world where you're actually doing things to support your health. So exercise. You know, I've talked about the fact that you're not going to get to your ideal weight by moving your body, and yet you must move your body for health, and you must move your body to actually maintain and be your ideal weight. So this is the, again, kind of interesting thing about nature. The bigger you are, the more calories you actually burn, the more weight loss you can achieve through exercise. It's just the law of kind of biochemistry and physics, moving more mass through space and time, you get greater weight loss. So men always lose more weight than women by exercising, okay? And the other kind of unfair thing is that as we get closer and closer to our ideal weight, you lose less and less weight as a result of exercise because you're smaller and smaller in terms of what you're doing, you know, with your exercise in that current body that you're in. So the less impact, to some extent, exercise has on weight loss the closer that you get to your ideal weight. So that's a little bit about this concept of I'm going to exercise to burn calories, right? So now let's talk about calories in, calories out in terms of what happens to most people, because we just got through the holidays, and I just want to show you how crazy this concept is that we're somehow going to lose weight by eating less and exercising more. So the average weight gain during the holidays is actually 10 pounds, okay? And then in January, we all get motivated and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this during the holidays. And we either work out or we diet and we reduce our calories or whatever it is that we do. And most of us will lose 2 to 3 pounds, at which point it usually is the end of January and we become disillusioned because eating less and exercising more doesn't work. And so we actually end up with 7 or 8 pounds of net weight gain each year as a result of the holidays. And I'm sure that many of you in this room can appreciate how easy it is to gain weight during the holidays, which, by the way, right? I always feast during the holidays because it's naturally going to happen anyway. And you know, without doing this lecture for people, I have to kind of giggle because when people come into my practice, they're like, oh my gosh, I gained 8 pounds during the holidays. What I want to say to them is, congratulations, you feasted. Now it's famine, right? But without conceptually explaining to them what is going on in their body and how that has just set up the mitochondrial rejuvenation, that now they can go back into the famine stage, it becomes a little complicated. So this is how most people actually gain weight. If you have 100 extra calories per day, just 100 calories, and the rest of your diet is perfect and spot on, and you do that every day for a year, you'll have 36,500 extra calories per year, and you'll gain 10 pounds that year. And this makes me giggle because you know those little snack bags now? They're 100-calorie snack bags, right? And they promote these and they market these as it's only 100 calories. If your diet was perfect and you ate one of those every single day, you would gain 10 pounds this year. Okay, that's how crazy the whole eat less and exercise more piece is. So why should you work out, right? If I just said all those things, why is it even important to go to the gym? And by the way, I lift, I do high intensity interval training, which I'm going to talk about, so I'm not telling you not to exercise because you must exercise to maintain, increase the number and efficiency of your mitochondria as you age. It's absolutely a critical part of health. You will not get there unless you're moving your body. Increasing your metabolic rate, so increasing the amount of energy that you burn at rest, which is called your metabolic rate. You absolutely need to increase your lean body mass, grow your lean body mass to maintain the amount of energy that you burn just daily sitting there. And if you don't work out time, and you will be confined to eating less and less as you age. And so with women, once again, when we do those body compositions, and men too, I'm always looking at where's your lean body mass, how does that relate to your metabolic rate, and we're trying to grow that in a meaningful way because we need that to maintain our metabolism, and it's tied into both the number of mitochondria and the efficiency of mitochondria, which is directly linked to aging prevention and disease prevention. Hormonal changes. So when you work out, all those hormones that I talked about, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, all these things that are critical for your health and critical for your weight are actually impacted positively too. And it's kind of fun to see. I've done this in my own body, like I'll go exercise and get my hormones measured. I mean, I see this all the time with my patients too. When you get into that stable exercise routine, you are hormonally shifting your body into a healthier, more metabolically active, more disease preventative state. So, you know, basically there's two things: increasing lean body mass, which increases your metabolism, and something I call fast and fit, which is also called high intensity interval training. So this is basically, you know, we give you a handout, and y'all are welcome to call the office and get this, but you're doing kind of sprint and rest, sprint and rest, sprint and rest type activity where you're getting that heart rate up, you're getting into anaerobic metabolism for a short period of time, which actually changes the entire hormonal cascade once again. And then just moving your body. I mean, you know, one of the things that I am finding as I get older, the older I get, the farther I park from the store. You know, because I want to walk. The more I take the stairs, the more I just make every single concentrated effort that I can do to basically move in my body. Because if you don't, it's the same use it or lose it piece. And the reality is too, there's no way, even if you maintain the same weight, that you're going to maintain your shape or your health over time without moving your body in a meaningful way. So you must exercise. Action items for exercise. So you actually, once again, you want to get either an even more technical way to get a body composition. It's called a DEXA scan. They do them down at UT. You're looking at your body fat, you're looking at your lean body mass, you're looking at your bone density. So we just do a more concentrated version of that called the BIA in the office, but we're looking at lean body mass, body fat percentages, we're looking at fluid in your body, is it in the cells where it belongs, we're looking at something called the phase angle, which are how healthy are your cells. All these things we're looking at in the practice. Again, when you call the office and say Stinson's 2018, you can come in and get a free body composition. In addition, efficient exercise, and the guys that are here have graciously offered to do an introductory session in terms of efficient exercise, which is a way to get maximum lean body mass and muscle growth in a very efficient, effective way. I've been doing it for, I don't know, 6 years, 8 years, some long period of time. But I love it because it's down and dirty and efficient, and it gets me actually what I need there. And just remember, guys, that you cannot out-exercise a bad diet. So it doesn't matter how much you move your body. If you're not fueling the way that works, if you're not in and out of feast and famine, you're just not going to get there. So bottom line, you must exercise for long-term health. Supplements, I just want to really briefly touch on these. I always talk about foundational support, multivitamin, antioxidant, essential fatty acids. These are very basic things. Ketogenic aids, I just talked about. The BHB stands for beta hydroxybutyric acid. It's one of those exogenous ketones, so you can take that drink that has one of the ketones that your body would make when you're fat burning, and you can actually drink it and get yourself into ketosis to help you transition between the sugar burning that you've been stuck in into the fat burning where you have unlimited energy and great brain power, and you feel like Superman or Superwoman in terms of just being able to work out and things. Carnitine is something that we call in the practice the fat forklift. So once again, it's picking up fat, it's shuttling it into the mitochondria or the energy burning factories in your body to actually allow you to get into that fat burning stage. CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, has a lot of science on it in terms of actually weight maintenance. Here's your butter coffee, right, that I talked about. So adding butter or MCT oil into coffee in the morning, and again, I put it in my little bullet blender. and blend it up and drink it. It's kind of frothy and yummy. But some of these oils, again, can really kind of ignite your energy and ignite your metabolism. And fat bombs, which we'll play with later, which are these kind of avocado truffle things that are just yummy and fun and wonderful. But I like all these things, especially kind of as you're transitioning into ketosis and really trying to kind of dial it in. Sleep, another critical piece. And remember those commercials where they're like, sleep and you'll lose weight? I used to always laugh. It's like, what? I'm supposed to go to sleep and I'm going to lose weight? What's that all about? But interestingly, there's science that says that if you sleep appropriately, you'll actually have a smaller waist, you'll be healthier, and you will have which is another way to kind of measure your body composition and are you close to your ideal weight. So why do I care about this? So in my practice today, I had at least 4 conversations with clients about how they're having difficulty sleeping. And this is pervasive. So we have 50 to 70 million people in this country that have some sort of a sleep issue. And those of you who know me know that I like melatonin over 40 because it is the sleep hormone and it supports healthy sleep. But sleep hygiene and quality sleep are actually and absolutely a critical part of health. And all the science asleep for the rejuvenation and the housekeeping things that happen during sleep between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And so one of my patients today, she's like, well, yeah, I'm getting 4 hours of sleep. I go to bed at 1:30. And I'm like, you got 30 minutes of the efficient housekeeping. So 10 to 2, which is 4 hours of this critical housekeeping sleep, it has to be during those hours because your body is actually programmed that way. And again, you're not going to get around this, guys. You're not going to be able to sleep from midnight till 4, or 2 to 6, or any other 4-hour period of time and get the same thing that you're going to get between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So I really encourage you, if you're a late night person, and I used to be, to shift those sleep hours, especially over 40, because you need the regenerative housekeeping pieces that are happening between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., not only for weight maintenance, but for your long-term health. And even, again, it's interesting, like even lack of sleep, like if they've done studies where if you don't sleep, the next day you're going to be hungrier. So everything is linked and connected in your body. Whether you believe in a higher power or whatever, there's some master designer up there who put us together in a way that we have this interconnection and communication in our body, and if we just listen to it and honor it, we are going to win every single time. So sleep hygiene, it's kind of fun. Now we have all these cool sleep tracking devices, and so people know more about their sleep, and if you're into that, that's great. For me, I'm just, I try to be in bed by 9 and asleep by 10, and I've gotten to be an earlier riser, and especially as I've gotten older, I'm a lot more productive in the early hours of the morning. It's important to get up in the morning and be exposed to bright light. Again, light is a critical part of our health. So you want that, you don't want to wake up and be in a dark room in the morning. You want that bright light exposure to actually reset this mechanism in your body with sleep-wake cycles. You want to actually shut down the lights that come from your computer and television screens and things, and there's a lot of programs out there. Holden and I were talking about Flux is one of them, but you can actually decrease the blue light that is being transmitted and emitted to you in the evening so that you have better sleep hygiene. Up at sunrise, down at sunset, again, just honoring nature there. We've talked about 10 to 2 being the magical hours for restorative housekeeping sleep. And again, I'm a big fan of melatonin over 40. One of the beloved products in our practice is a melatonin press product. And people just rave about how their sleep has changed as a result of it. And that's a good thing. Action items. So sleep hygiene. And again, just go online. There's all sorts of things about the temperature of your room and what just dark and all these things. But I think sleep hygiene, we don't really think about it. Sometimes we think of sleep as just kind of this good, fun thing that we do, but it's critical for health. You can get a sleep monitoring device if you choose to. You can filter the blue light out of your screens and things that you're seeing late at night. And again, I'm a fan of melatonin. Stress reduction. And maybe we should call this stress balance, because the interesting thing is, again, we're not meant to have no stress. We're just meant to have stress and calm and stress and calm and stress and calm. So this is about balance. Once again, everything in the body is about balance. And so if we're going to be fine as long as we have a lot of calm. And we need to create that pattern and that balance in our bodies. If you have a lot of stress and you feel like your stress hormones and your stress balance are way out of whack, the opportunity is to actually get a 4-spot cortisol and see where your stress hormones are. We do it early in the morning, 12 noon, afternoon, in the evening. What people do for stress reduction is really a personal journey. And I talk to people about a lot of different things. It could be walking the dog, it could be Tai Chi, Qigong, talking to a friend, taking a run, working out, prayer, meditation, whatever it looks like for you. But all I want to do is make sure that when you have stress, you get back down to baseline, because what happens is that we have stress, and before we get back down to baseline, we have more stress and more stress. And so that stress curve gets higher and higher with higher cortisol levels and more degradation of our body with stress over time if we do not come back down to baseline. So action items for this. DHA sulfate is what I measure in the practice. It's kind of a 3-month stress meter. It tells me overall where that person's stress balance has been. Some people, I'll go in and get a 4-spot cortisol. These are people that, again, super low energy in the morning, can't get to sleep at night. Their whole cortisol and stress hormone patterns are really out of whack, and they really need support here. And then you can get kind of a Zen and stress tracking device if you choose to do that too. Everything else. So what I've just talked about, food, supplementation, hormonal balance, stress reduction, sleep, exercise. I talk about these things over and over again in my practice, and I talk about them regardless of how long you've been in my practice. And sometimes people have been in my practice for like 19 years now. Because getting back to those basics and focusing on fundamentals is absolutely essential for your health. If you do those things correctly, you have basically won the battle for most people. Are there other things that come into play? Yes, I have people that are super sensitive. Their chemistry is such that when we start talking about things like antibiotics in food and growth enhancing chemicals and drugs in animals and endocrine disrupting chemicals like BPA and phthalates and so on and so forth, sometimes these things become incredibly important for people, and they are the difference between success and lack of success. Mention them just so that you're thinking about them, because again, the more you kind of clean up your world and clean up your environment and your diet and what your body's exposed to, the easier it is for your body to actually work. But these are and although you want to have consciousness about them, I also always tell people too, none of us live in a bubble, and our body is really designed to stand up to a tremendous amount of insults and impacts and wear and tear and everything else. And so think about these things, but probably don't obsess about them. And if you're really doing all those other things and you're still struggling, then these things are worth looking at. And that is everything that I have.